So hello and welcome back to Art of Science. My name is Graham Ambrose, an assistant professor at North Carolina State University and your host here on Art of Science podcast, which is a quarterly interview podcast that coincides with each issue of Policy Studies Journal. And here, just off the bat, just a reminder to rate, review, and subscribe this podcast. So today is a little bit different. So instead of focusing on one author group and their paper, we have invited the editorial team members for the recent special issue. That includes Callie Curley, Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Miami, Tomás Olivier, Assistant Professor in the Department of Public Administration and International Affairs at Syracuse University, Saba Siddiki, who's a professor at the Department of Public Administration and International Affairs at Syracuse University, as well as Geoboo Song, who's editor-in-chief of PSJ and a professor in political science, public policy, and statistics and analytics at the University of Arkansas. So at a high level, the special issue focuses on advancing the study of policy design through stronger integration of policy design scholarship and mainstream policy process models, theories, and frameworks. The idea here is that we're encouraging novel conceptualizations of policy designs and improved understandings of the antecedents and consequences. So outside of the issue itself, the team will broaden the discussion, engaging in the process of organizing the special issue, the goals that inform this process, as well as how this process differs from other special issue processes. So with that, with the introduction over, do you guys mind kind of talking a little bit about the special issue?
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much, Graham, for having us here. We're so thrilled to talk about the special issue. It's been a couple years since we started working on it. It's really great to see it finally out in print and being able to talk about all the excellent work that went into there. So to just kind of give more background on this issue, this is a result of an initiative undertaken by a set of policy design and policy process scholars, including all of us, and Mike Jones, the previous editor-in-chief of PSJ. We were all just sort of interested in thinking about what might be a next frontier for policy design research. And we noticed that there were a lot more publications showing up on the topic, and we thought this really could be a nice opportunity and time to think about that question. And the more we started talking about it, we just really saw the potential of greater integration among policy design and policy process research, particularly different sort of mainstream policy process models, theories, and frameworks. And I think the key opportunity we saw there is, potential learning from treating policy design as a more explicit variable within the context of these other theories, models, and frameworks, and thinking about how the explicit characterization of policy design in the context of those and applications of those could really help our understanding of antecedents and consequences of policy design within different political and policy environments. So, we set out to sort of create an opportunity to engage in a conversation with the broader community on this topic. And we were really keen on, inviting papers from scholars from around the world. We were really keen on inviting papers that were going to showcase different methodological applications with this integrative focus, and also, highlight different topical applications, different domain applications. And so we kind of went out there in a way, soliciting a degree of creativity on the part of the community and thinking a little bit differently about both models, theories, and frameworks, as well as policy design research.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, you guys are talking kind of broadly about seeing policy design research come up in different places. But could you talk about kind of the specific idea behind this special issue? Where did that come from? What were those kind of original conversations?
So I'm happy to take this one. In, I don't know, what was it, 2021 or so, Saba and I were working on a paper on conceptualizing policy design and the policy process. It's in Policy and Politics, and we had fun with that one. It was kind of a really sort of creative endeavor to see what was happening in how we could sort of trace policy design through, in some ways, these stages heuristic within the policy process. And as we were talking through this, we kept saying, man, wouldn't it be great if we could connect the elements that we see in this bigger cycle that are relevant for policy design to the different model series and frameworks that are out there, so that we can start having a really intentional conversation about how policy design is embedded within these model theories and frameworks, so that we can start, talking to each other in a way that kind of is grounded in the literature that sort of allows communication between these different models, theories, and frameworks in a way that really elevates what it is that we do within policy process scholarship.
And Cali or others, I guess I'm really curious because you're talking about kind of policy design as kind of this overarching thing that's seen across these frameworks, theories, and models, right? Can you talk about like thinking through that and seeing it as this overarching concept that really kind of plugs into a lot of other things that we see in the policy process?
Do you guys want me to follow up? Okay. So I don't know. I mean, back in 2021, I don't exactly know what inspired us to do this, but as we were talking, we just started thinking about policy design as these, elements within formulation that kind of transpired into content, but that content itself has to be interpreted, right? Like the people who are responsible for implementing policy have to read through and kind of figure out what that content itself kind of means in the process of implementation. And so, yes, there is this very human component to what happens in implementation, but there is also kind of this guide that exists within design. And so we started thinking about the role that design played within and throughout sort of the stages. And then as we were talking through, we realized that these theories, models, and frameworks that contribute into these spaces are really speaking to some of these same design content elements, or even to the formulation of those content elements. And wouldn't it be great if we could kind of leverage a similar language to build out our understanding of how those content or elemental pieces really kind of emerged within the scholarship that we were undertaking?
Awesome. And I mean, so hearing this excitement about the paper, and now knowing that it's a special issue, can you talk about that process of kind of realizing that there's opportunity there and actually initiating and then kind of going through that process of the special issue?
I can take a stab at that one. So, one of the things that I think it's important to note when you're trying to bridge these highly fractured and potentially siloed models, theories, and frameworks with a broad literature like the policy design one is that you want to give people as many opportunities as possible to test and discuss their ideas to ensure that the final product is of high quality for a journal like PSJ, right? And also because we acknowledge that undertaking this requires, as Saba mentioned earlier, a lot of creativity. So we wanted to give people the opportunity to practice that creativity and engage in conversations with others to come up with creative and high quality work, right? So we wanted to open the process up, giving people who wanted additional feedback before a submission to the journal and giving them an opportunity to do so. So we came up with this peer submission process or peer comment process where people were assigned to a colleague and they could share their work before they submitted it to the journal, to give them, again, an opportunity to practice this creativity, but also I think it's very useful. It's a good equalizer, right? Because potentially for early career scholars or for people from other countries who might have might see challenging to submit or to publish in a journal like PSJ, we wanted to give them an opportunity to, to put their best foot forward, right? So we gave people this opportunity. Either way, everyone was invited to submit to the special issue, regardless of whether they participated or not in this peer exchange opportunity. There were actually 34 manuscripts that participated in this peer exchange process, of which 13 were actually submitted to the special issue and 5 were actually published in this special issue. In total, there were 34 submissions to the special issue, and we ended up publishing 12 of them, which we're very happy and proud of.
So, I mean, the peer review process or the peer kind of paper exchange seems pretty unique. Just curious where that idea came from, and if there are kind of other processes or other experiences that informed that decision.
I am going to defer to this on this question to Cali and Saba to get their input.
I'll give a little bit of context. So I'm current, editor-in-chief of PSJ. I started working for PSJ back in 2019 as an associate editor. And since then, before Saba, Kelly, and Tommy started this initiative, we had a couple special issue initiatives. My frustration from a sort of editorial piece perspective was that was not open enough to include, and Tommy talked about it, to those people who do not have any sort of opportunity of this sort. The other sort of frustration was that for some reason, a lot of special issue authors, once they are part of the special initiative, then they felt like they are going to be able to publish it, right? So from our perspective and from his perspective, sometimes because we promised a special issue, sometimes we had to publish something that is not good enough, or many times maybe half of the special initiatives actually failed, right? Yeah. So there was a sort of motivation to think deep and then try to design this process more rigorous as possible and then as open as possible. So Tommy kind of touched on that topic, that maybe we can make this as an open call and try to encourage a lot of participation from those who were not able to have that sort of opportunity. For the editorial integrity issue, for that, we actually kind of separate the role of special issue editors versus PSA editors. So I was fortunate that Saba was working as a special editor, but at the same time, she was able to work as a PSA editor, as an associate editor back then. So she led very rigorous peer review process, also made a lot of manuscript decisions, right? While when she needed help from Tommy and Kelly, she reached out to them and asked opinions or recommendations and things like that, right? So this is a little bit different from traditional model, that in that traditional model, especially sectors, oftentimes they have a manuscript decision-making power, right? So we had that sort of separation design through the process.
Certainly. I saw other people unmuted themselves. So is there any other folks that want to chime in?
I would say, yeah, sorry, Kali.
Okay.
It was very, very painful process for everybody. A lot of patience. But I mean, it took more than 2 years think about it. But I think from my experience, this was the milestone special issue, one of the most successful special issue initiatives we have ever had, right? In PSA history. So, even though the process was painful, we are very happy about the final outcome. For that, I really appreciate Saba, Kelly, and Tommy for their role. Also, all the contributing authors who were very patient throughout the process. Sorry, my interruption.
Don't worry about it. I was just going to say, I don't think that Saba and I or Tommy were really prepared for how much interest there was in the call. I mean, 63 submissions, right? 38 pairings for a peer review exchange for a special issue. That I was not expecting, especially with how kind of, I don't want to say narrow because it's actually quite a broad call, but how specific we were in kind of that pairing between design and, models, theories, and frameworks. And I had been through a peer revision process before with another journal and, not actually peer review, but like a pre-submission peer review where then you go through peer review. And honestly, the feedback that we got through that process, I think, was very inspiring in some ways, very motivating. And I don't know if it was my recommendation or Saba, if we just kind of thought, who knows if there's interest, let's find out. But either way, I think that none of us were kind of expecting the type of volume that we received for it. And then to have, just about half of those manuscripts, not those specific ones, but for half of that number to show up in the actual interest for PSJ is the special issue after having received feedback. And, it's great to know that 5 of those 63 wound up published through that peer review process, because it shows that when you give people an opportunity to get early feedback, it really does enhance the sort of overall quality of manuscripts. So I don't know if that answered your original question or not, Graham, but hopefully it does.
No, I think it's helpful, and I appreciate the context as well, and kind of getting back to this idea that Geoboo had talked about of maybe the tedious process leading to a successful outcome. Could you guys talk a little bit more about decisions on that process, the kind of pain points and the successes along the way, especially if you're thinking about recommending this type of structure to another journal or another special issue? What are those kind of critical components that you have learned throughout this kind of innovative or different process?
Can I follow up on just before answering
Certainly.
very directly, just something we were talking, but I don't think it's unrelated to what you're asking. I mean, I think that, I think one thing that we learned, but wasn't a surprise necessarily, we just kind of observed it, was that, the special issue process for us became a mechanism for community building, and sort of creating a conversation among the group of scholars that are working on these topics. The peer paper exchange, in a way, was another mechanism for that. So, if you get paired with somebody else, somebody that you may not know as part of this peer paper exchange, and you're sort of voluntarily providing feedback to your partner, with the aim of helping them improve their work and getting that back. I mean, I think that's an important relationship building that happened, and exposure to different ideas among sometimes people who were not previously connected. And so I think that's also another aspect of the peer paper exchange and this broader special issue initiative that I would want to highlight. The other thing I just wanted to say was, as we were going to, the peer paper exchange, as Geoboo and Cali noted, was, one of our attempts to get, good quality manuscripts that would survive a rigorous peer review once they were submitted to the PSJ system. But it was important for us early on to keep it disconnected. So we were very clear to the submitters that, this is in no way part of the actual review process. And we, as special issue editors, guest editors, are not, favoring papers that go through the exchange. And I think so clarity from our side was important, but then I hope that the contributors felt we certainly went through an effort to design it this way, that it was a place for honest, constructive, helpful feedback for each other. So I think, to Kelly's point, we were surprised at the volume of submissions we got. I remember telling Geoboo, he called one day, and I was at a conference, and I told him how many submissions we got, and you were kind of floored, Geoboo. But I think we also were pleasantly surprised about like all the benefits that came from this peer paper exchange. So I think that was actually it was rewarding for the process on a couple different dimensions.
And just to follow up on that, yeah, Callie?
I was going to say, for pain points, though, I think one of the things that we didn't necessarily anticipate was that we had to be very careful then in the actual review or assignment process, because we couldn't give them a manuscript they had already seen. And so this peer exchange kind of limited then who it was that got assigned to review manuscripts within the PSJ reviewer process, because we wanted to maintain double-blind review. That was it.
So,
Yeah.
Geoboo?
I'm gonna just add one more thing, because it seems like we try to kind of, but it's an amazing system and model that all of us try to build. However, this is relatively sort of novel new model for various different reasons. A lot of journals that cannot spend more than 2 years to just publish one special issue. Some of the junior authors probably they need to publish something as quickly as possible. Right? And a lot of authors and contributors, they are not again familiar with this model, so there's a sort of a perceptual gap between what we wanted to do throughout the process versus those contributing authors who are not really familiar with what we wanted to do. So it's a very sort of a process of mutual learning, and get to try to converge in a point where we want to be. And after all, I would say it was a great success, but again, the process was quite painful because of the additional sort of a component that sort of slow down the process a little bit. And sometimes a lot of episodes here and there, midnight call from Saba and talk about how should we do this to deal with this particular situation. Sunday morning, like, right? And so all those things were a very, very amazing learning experience from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the discussion, because I think it seems to be at least clear from my side, somebody outside of the process, that there's some clear benefits, right? It's building community, it's strengthening kind of the quality of the papers itself. But on the flip side, I mean, you all took a larger lift than probably a normal special issue. And especially what Geoboo is saying as well is, in the publisher perish mindset, this longer period might be problematic in itself. Do you guys kind of see other trade-offs in this model compared to a more traditional special issue model? And if there are, what are they, and how did you work through them?
Well, I think something that was different for us in this special issue, and I've had the the great opportunity to contribute to special issues over the years, and even organize a couple of other ones. But this one was a little bit unique. Like, I think in the special issues that I've been a part of before, it felt like it was there was a group of people that were working on a similar issue. And so, it was like a logical next step, like, is there an opportunity to publish somewhere, either as an edited volume or in a special issue, a collection of papers that are discussing a similar thing? And I mean, clearly there are benefits of that kind of approach, because then the collection is quite coherent, in focus, and maybe there it is a little bit easier to have a little bit of exchange that amongst a smaller group of people to kind of help each other develop manuscripts. If somebody else is also contributing to a manuscript, an issue. This one felt different because I think we were sort of thinking about this special issue as a mechanism for pursuing a new frontier that was much more open-ended way. So we as a group of scholars that were kind of engaging in the policy process in different ways, just kind of recognized this opportunity, and we really wanted to have a very expansive call to see what kind of creative ideas would come back. And we also we wanted to have a process that was going to be fruitful. But it was like kind of a little bit of a Wild West situation in terms of we didn't know what we were going to get, and we were pleasantly surprised with what we did get. But it seemed like we went into this special issue with a slightly different focus, a bit more expansive, a bit more creative focus, which had then its own considerations, because what we got was a little bit more disparate info in topical areas, disparate in application. And so then, as we were sort of thinking as editors, how to synthesize that and convey this collection to the community in our introduction, we had to think very thoughtfully about, what is this issue doing, and what is it saying, and what is the kind of research agenda it's allowing us to speak to, and so forth.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up on that, despite the open nature or the Wild West of the submissions that you guys received, can you talk a little bit more about the key themes or insights that came out of the special issue?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I will say that people really did take on our call, right? They showed us that there's a lot of potential opportunity to bridge theories of the policy process with notions and approaches to policy design. And so, like Saba said, it's a little bit of a new frontier that we're seeing here, but it's nothing necessarily that is brand new, right? It's just a new way of really approaching and thinking about these elements and kind of bringing them together. So in the special issue, we saw methodological advances, some in the text analysis, content analysis, focus group space of how we're, leveraging different types of data to kind of thinking about social network analysis almost as a tool to understand content within the body of an actual policy design, right? And so there's some new innovative and applications of methodological approaches in the special issue. There are also some revisions in some ways to different policy design concepts. So there's one that looks at how sort of target populations aren't singular in identity, right? So it's looking at how multiple identities sort of shape how people react and respond to policy interventions. And then we've got some that kind of look at policy tools, mixes, and bundles, right? Sort of understanding how concepts like social cohesion might influence tool selection, or how the multiple streams framework, right, may result in different types of tool selection depending on where in the streams, you're prioritizing, for instance. It's so that's kind of what we see from the policy process theories, models, framework space, right? And the policy design stuff. But then we also have some emerging concepts that kind of keep coming up within the body of the special issue. Things around, how do we measure environmental justice or procedural justice within the context of design? And this is something that there's been a call out for a bit now to kind of do. And they really took up the challenge, the authors within the special issue. You see a little bit of that, how do we measure the creation of networks within that body of the design piece, which is new and innovative. And then there's also a little bit of a twist on policy symbolism within the special issue, which is different and unique, but it really refers to symbolism as this potential momentum builder within the sort of policy adoption space. And so there's a little bit of everything, every flavor within the body of the special issue, but it all really kind of comes back to how we understand and interpret policy design within the model series and frameworks.
Awesome. I'm just curious, kind of over time, right? So thinking about those original 60-some papers, has like that Wild West notion kind of pulled through to the end here, that a matter of kind of searching deeply for these key insights that are coming through, or I'm just curious if you could speak to how that really open-ended process in the beginning has led to kind of the unique aspects that actually come through in the special issue itself.
To the risk of continuing using the same analogy of the Wild West, I think, it is a Wild West because ultimately we're going after the new frontiers in knowledge and theory development and concept development. And I like to think that, yes, it has materialized in this special issue. And I think, and I speak to this personally, at a personal level, it has also materialized in the way I see this literature now, right? Because when I joined this idea of the special issue, I had a very particular notion of what I was hoping to see in a special issue, what kinds of manuscripts, what kind of conceptual, theoretical, and to a certain extent, methodological approach I wanted to see. And then when I started looking at the papers, I was like, oh, wait a second, this is not what I had in mind, which is not a bad thing, right? But it made me think, about my own preconceptions and preconceived notions of where I thought the literature was going. And it made me change a lot, those perceptions, right? Which I find it, very, very useful from a completely selfish point of view, if I were to say, right? So I would like to say that I'd like to think that those goals have materialized in ways that were different than at least I was anticipating, and which I find kind of cool, right? Because it also taught me a lot of things.
Can I just add, not to steal the mic more, but a lot of the times when we read manuscripts, we're reading with purpose, right? Either to critique or to find. We don't often read with the intent to sort of dream, if that makes sense, like to dream up what we could envision the relationships between these things could look like. We could, posit ideals, right? And I mean, some of these manuscripts, not to sound corny, but like they inspired me in a little bit of a way, right? They inspire me to keep pushing in this direction with my own scholarship, to keep trying to unravel and then reconnect some of these things that at times feel treated very disparately within the literature. And so I don't know, for me, I think that's kind of one of the big takeaways, right? Is like sometimes we need to step back away from reading with intent to kind of just read to dream a little. And I know that sounds super corny and I'm kind of embarrassed I just said that, but we're just going to pretend that it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to add on that, and I share Kelly's and Tomás's sense of inspiration on this. I guess we sort of thought about this. Okay, there's opportunities to sort of rethink the conceptualization of policy design within the context of these policy models, theories, and frameworks, where maybe policy design is there, but it's not as explicitly a focus. or isn't kind of treated in the same way that we have been thinking about it in the policy design literature, in terms of like these qualities of policies, or qualities of policy or character dynamics of policy formulation. So we kind of went into this, we're like, okay, well, there are a variety of questions we think like scholars could be answering. So for example, if when we're thinking about policy change as an important dependent variable in a variety of different models, theories, and frameworks, like there's opportunity to draw from policy design literature to learn, well, what qualities of policies change? And here we have, a variety of approaches that enable a systematic investigation of that. Or when we're thinking about, policy diffusion, and we're thinking like, well, parts of policies may diffuse, features of policies may diffuse, qualities of policies may diffuse. And of course, policy diffusion scholars are looking at that, but maybe there's something from policy design literature that further enables the investigation of those kinds of questions. And so we were thinking about it. I only offer those examples to suggest like, we were thinking at a high level like this. What we saw materialize in the actual papers was obviously much more nuanced, but more importantly, reflected what authors were viewing as like key opportunities, that then got us sort of rethinking, okay, we hadn't envisioned that application. That's really cool. Now that is opening up a new research stream, or like a new line of inquiry that, others can follow up on. So just to sort of, build on what others have already said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think, we've talked a little bit about the pros or cons, the tedium and the benefits of such a process, and also the kind of cohesive but dreaming whole that this special issue has become. I guess my question for you is, do you have advice for others that are interested in kind of developing a special issue, given this process and what you've learned through this process?
I can try here, but I want to say that I would like to hear Geoboo's opinion on this as editor-in-chief as well, because I'm very curious to hear his thoughts as well. I have a couple of things that I would suggest to people. First one is to make sure that if you want to put together a special issue, that you have a sense of purpose, right? You want special issues, in my opinion, are amazing for showing and reflecting the fact that we haven't figured things out, right? And it gives us that playground to, as Cali was saying, come up with creative and inspiring ideas, right? It gives you a little bit of that flexibility. So I think we need to embrace more that nature of special issues. The second thing I would say is make sure you find amazing colleagues that will join you in that endeavor. In my case, Saba and Cali are like amazing. Not only amazing people, but also amazing scholars. So that makes the work much more enjoyable and fun and exciting. So make sure you find people like them. And then the third thing I would say is you have to be flexible. And you have to adopt an attitude of flexibility, not only with the tasks at hand, such as finding reviewers, which is very, very difficult and sometimes very hard because you run out of names pretty quickly, as people say they can't, or they've already have a paper under review, or whatever other reason. But also, I think it's important to be flexible in terms of open-mindedness. As we were saying earlier, if you really want to embrace the spirit of a special issue as a playground for coming up with new ideas, you have to also acknowledge the fact that the special issue might assume a form that is different than what you envisioned, right? And that the papers might look different from what you envisioned. And I think that's great. And but it requires, I think, a sense of flexibility, or intellectual flexibility in that sense, right? Be open to new ideas, be open to people presenting things that you didn't think about and are, inspiring and really cool. And in some cases, kind of like pushing people to think heavily about certain issues. So I would say those are my three suggestions as someone who participated from the guest editor side.
Geoboo, do you have thoughts?
Oh, I cannot agree more than that. I mean, it's just exactly right. And I think that others here, Saba and Cali, would definitely agree with what Tommy talked about, right? Just by watching what you're talking about. So, again, the flip side of that, all this procedural success and then final outcome, is that you just need to, as a guest lecturer, you need to do a lot of work, all the hard work, extra work. I mean, the peer paper exchange process, they start almost like 70 proposals, right? And kind of narrow down and things like that. I mean, that's a lot. And we are talking about before submitting to PSJ, right? Right. And once you got submitted, then there's another layers of review process, right? And so this is a lot of work. Um, so for that, again, I cannot, say thank you enough for these people and all the contributing authors. But yeah, but that just keep that in mind, right? It's a lot of work with this model. So.
There's one thing I would like to add here, and it is that make sure that you match or you pair your idea of a special issue with an amazing journal like PSJ, where the associate editors, the people who are helping with the day-to-day management of the journal are top-notch, and they made our life, so much easier than it could have, that could be in any other circumstance. So I think having a teammate, in this case PSJ has been amazing too. So that would be my other recommendation.
And I'll just add that, Tommy, I think that being paired with PSJ made your and my life easier, but I think a lot of that wound up falling on Saba's shoulder. So that's just to say thank you, Saba, for always being such an incredible scholar, colleague, and supportive, just community-oriented person in our field and life, because you're awesome, and we couldn't have done any of it without the collective group of people on this screen. And also, thank you for bailing all of us out of jams when we were like, I don't know the answer to this question. Help.
Well, thank you. That's very generous, and I echo Tommy's earlier point that when you're working with such a great team, it's just you're happy to give and you're happy to be a part of it. So, but they did a ton of work, so don't let them fool you. They did tons of hard work. But I guess there is a couple of things I would like to say from the perspective of kind of this special issue organizing. So we as well, not just this special issue, actually other special issues that I've been a part of, and also, sort of been on the side of evaluating dossiers and resumes, is that there are like a lot of stereotypes around special issues. So like on the part of submitters, I think that sometimes there can be the perception that you're going to have a more lenient review process, either because like the editors have reached out to encourage you to submit something, or maybe you're part of like a organizing team. I think another stereotype that we hear is that, well, maybe relating to that people discount special issue submissions relative to other kinds of submissions. And I think I think as a special issue organizer, then it's important to design a process and engage with the editorial team in a way that the whole thing is very rigorous, because then it encourages people to submit their very best work, to encourage that honest, constructive feedback. But then, we sort of can push back against, special issue submissions not being as highly regarded when, we put a lot of time and effort as authors into those, and we take them very seriously, and they're we want to do our work with integrity because it reflects our, our effort and our passions and so forth. So I think, there are various points that as designers of a special issue, you can urge a call that's going to facilitate that rigor and that quality. So like in our case, the peer paper exchange, as we talked about, was one mechanism to try to encourage like quality submissions and get people early feedback to try to, improve their work. I appreciate the way the PSJ or editorial team handled the review process, which was that basically like these papers are gonna undergo the same external peer review process. And that process again was completely disconnected from the peer paper exchange process. I at some point, the special issue team was involved in sort of helping to invite reviewers and making calls on the decisions. But, the editorial team and Geoboo were CC'd on those decisions. They were aware of what was going on. So it's a very transparent process, which I think is really important. And so I think as a designer, you want to make of an issue, you want to make as many choices as you can to have a fruitful product, to have a fruitful exercise, but also be able to signal to the broader community that this was a transparent, fair, and rigorous process. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. I feel like hearing all of this, I guess I have one kind of last question about the special issue for all of you. I feel like we've discussed kind of the pros of this, right? The open-ended nature, kind of the more inclusive nature of it. Would you suggest that every special issue should be like this, or are there kind of specific goals that are tied to your aims that encourage this process, whereas kind of different goals or different aims would lead to a different process? I'm just curious to kind of better understand your understanding or your interest in kind of advocating for such a process and kind of the adoption of this more broadly. Yeah, Cali.
So I think Saba kind of laid it out very plainly earlier. It's kind of like, we didn't really know what we were going to get or what kind of interest there was. So the very broad open call, the peer exchange was really around kind of community developing and seeing who's interested in what's out there in regard to this very random thing that we were kind of creatively exploring, right? It turns out there was a ton of interest in it. And I'm really glad that we went this path to kind of increase and develop and build interest in the sort of policy design and the policy process theories, models, and frameworks stuff. But I think to her earlier point too, like other special issues that are sort of neatly packaged and extremely well-purposed and sort of a coherent narrative, right? There's room and intentionality for both of those things, and maybe in that environment, there are more opportunities for informal feedback throughout the sort of development of that special issue. This type of formalization maybe is only really necessary when you're in that let's push the frontier kind of space, rather than kind of let's, tell the community what it is that we are actively doing, and so I'm extraordinarily proud to have been part of this process and to have worked with this amazing team. And, I would recommend going through an experience like this at least once, but I'd also recommend to younger versions of ourselves that they have to learn how to say no, or at least when to say yes. And so that does not mean that every special issue needs to have this type of a laborious back end or front end process, I guess. But is just to say that sometimes you need those things to figure out where the state of the field really is and whether or not there's enough room to kind of push a little bit further, maybe a little bit farther.
And Kelly, you've kind of transitioned for us, which I think is great, coming up on the hour here. Looking back, is there advice outside of understanding when to say no and yes that you would give yourselves? Being more conscientious of kind of scope and the amount of commitment work that you're saying yes to has? Any other advice?
I mean, I always think that I'm never in a position of giving any kind of advice to people, right? But nevertheless, this would be my sort of 2 cents here. I think it's important to try to get a sense of what is the puzzle that you're interested in early on. And it doesn't have to be, in my opinion, like a super defined puzzle, right? You need to have a general idea of what is that puzzle, and then you start chipping away at it from different perspectives. And you can, I think, develop a strong pipeline around the chipping away of the puzzle, right? And in doing so, I think it's important to maintain a sense of curiosity, flexibility in acknowledging that sometimes you'll find answers that you're not expecting or that you were not hoping to get. Also flexibility in trying to incorporate different methodological and conceptual and theoretical approaches. As Cali earlier mentioned, learn to say no. I think it's important. And most importantly, try to find cool people along the way. I have personally been very lucky. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love my job so much, is because I get to work and I get to do it with really cool, nice, and smart people.
Yeah, I can say a little bit on top of what Kelly and Ami and Saba talked about. So from my perspective, um, you know, there are a couple different roles, especially editors, journals, and then authors and reviewers and things like that. They sort of utility function. Sorry that I'm using economic terms, but utility functions are slightly different, right? So this model then might have an impact on that kind of utility function. I kind of implied that at the beginning, right? For PSJ, I want to publish the best possible research that can contribute meaningfully to policy theory, innovation, and development, right? So that's my goal. But then the process set up in a way that requires a lot of time and energy and efforts, right? So those who are other part of the table might think slightly differently, even though when you look at the final output and outcomes, we are very proud of that, right? And then the situation of the journal is quite different. New journals probably they can take advantage of this specialty initiative as a tool to get more submissions and things like that. But that's my goal. So probably, and actually I was pretty explicit about. We have a couple other specialty initiatives going on right now that we are going to adopt this model as a model for other specialty and PSJ. So that's all I can say right now.
Saba, I saw that you unmiked or unmuted your mic earlier.
I don't know why I unmuted earlier, but I don't know what I was going to say. But I think, as I've been sort of reflecting on the job of an academic, I think that there are a few things that I've really been thinking about that are perhaps relevant to share as part of this, which is that there's a lot when you start out on the tenure track that feels like a very independent exercise. Like, you may be in a department where nobody else kind of does the same thing, or you may just be, kind of just very, very focused on your publications and just don't really have time to look up because you have to publish and you've got to teach your classes and you're getting into service and so forth. And it kind of goes on for a long time like that. And I think for a long time, you can sort of feel like you're part of this broader community, but you're really kind of just working independently on your work, on your stuff, and you're just trying to push forward and go through these hoops and milestones. But now as I look back, or not look back, but reflect on what we're doing, as researchers, we really are engaging in a dialogue with one another. We're engaging in a dialogue with one another with our research. We're engaging in a dialogue by just putting our work out there. And I think these mechanisms like special issues that basically allow for that dialogue to happen are really important, and they're really meaningful. And I think that we should think about them as really key opportunities to have conversations about things that we really want more concerted effort on. And that can be something very broadly scoped or something very narrowly scoped. It can be methodological, it could be theoretical, it could be topical, whatever. But I really just more and more just kind of see the community aspect of this, and what I see more and more as what we do individually as really feeding something that's much bigger than us and kind of supporting this broader exchange of ideas. So I just see the special issues kind of fitting into that. Mm-hmm.
Cali, any reflections?
I mean, everything that we do contributes to a bigger picture, a public good. It provides us the opportunity to kind of answer what Tommy said, right? Like puzzles. It lets us build pictures that maybe we didn't always anticipate. And I don't know, I have been very thankful for the career that I have had as an academic, and while you're in the grind, sometimes things feel a little bit like you're getting beat down, and you sometimes forget that like you can stand back up, you can walk, before you have to run. And once you get over that tenure line, you have the kind of space to take a breath and allow yourself to think about who you want to be as part of like that larger academic puzzle, And I think being part of this special issue, and as Tommy says, finding cool people to work with, helps you to kind of put that picture together for yourself. And when I say learn to say no, what I really mean by that is learning how to say yes to things that serve you and no to things that distract you or take you away from that central image, right? And by image, I mean the piece of the puzzle that you're trying to build. And so you're going to have a million opportunities in your career, even when it feels like you aren't. And those opportunities don't stop just because you say no this one time, right? And so I think that that's an important lesson that I kind of wish I had learned a little bit earlier, is that sometimes when we say no, it's just no, not right now. It's not a permanent thing. So that's my 2 cents.
Wonderful. Well, Tomás, Saba, Cali, and Geoboo, I just want to say thank you for spending the last hour chatting with me. And for our listeners, just a reminder to rate, review, and subscribe. Additionally, you can follow us at Art of Science Pod on Twitter. And thank you both to PSJ, as well as the Center of Policy Design and Governance at Syracuse University, which support this podcast through a joint initiative. And again, thank you for our guests today, and I'll see everyone again next quarter.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you